After Arts here, the Daybell debacle, how and why. In part one, I'll set the stage and show what gave them the potential to do what they did. And in part two, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. So forgive me for reading. I'm not very good at extemporaneously speaking. To say the devil made them do it is too simplistic. It's the age-old struggle between good and evil. Now, I don't think of God as a man in the sky, nor do I personify the devil as being red with pointy ears and a tail. Allow me to begin with the assumption that there are forces, energies, and frequencies that are positive, joyful, helpful, and life-affirming. These would be considered good, angelic, divine, transformational, things that come from God. On the other end of the spectrum, there are forces, energies, and frequencies that are negative, destructive, and toxic. These we call bad, demonic, satanic, unclean, evil spirits, archons, or jinn. Toxic individuals walk amongst us, and whether we choose to call them demons, reptilians, sociopaths, or narcissists, we still have to navigate around them and find a way to thrive. Now, making things even more complicated is Lucifer, the angel of light. Lucifer is like the gateway drug that will lead you down the garden path to hell. Lucifer is like the seductive narcissist in the love-bombing honeymoon phase. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 12. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Now, everything I discuss on this channel is from my own experience. I was a fundamental Christian for years. Then later, my interest turned to ceremonial magic, and I joined the Ordo Templi Orientis. I'm also a Reiki master. I left the OTO in 2001, and these days I would say I resonate closer to Christianity than anything else. My spiritual journey was always my own personal search for enlightenment. My family of origin were non-practicing Jews. Of all the things imposed upon me as I was growing up, religion was not one of them. And there are some truisms about Christians, wearing their Sunday best for church, showing up for services in a grandiose display of piousness, and then showing up for services in a grandiose display of piousness, and then reverting back to being a complete a-hole for the rest of the week. Hypocrisy on full display. I had a friend who was drummed out of our church for having affairs with the parishioners. 2 weeks later, the very same pastor who so rabidly went after my friend had to step down. Two weeks later, the very same pastor who so rabidly crusaded against my friend was forced to step down because he was caught having an affair. Talk about projection. But this is a human condition, and as Milo this is a human condition, and as Milo Yiannopoulos would say, people are messy and complicated. This is where organized religion fails. It doesn't take into account the whole person. It doesn't adequately address one's unconscious shadow material. The unconscious shadow material is all our baggage, all the trauma we never processed, replete with all our guilt and shame. Much of it is from early childhood. Pre-verbal trauma we don't have language to describe. These are the deeply ingrained fight or flight coping mechanisms we developed in order to survive. So much of it is so old you don't realize it's even there. It's become your filter for how you experience the world, your default position for this is simply the way it is. Add to the mountain of guilt and shame the notion of sin, and the guilt and shame magnifies. The Christian antidote for this is to give it all to Jesus, which is liberating and euphoric at first because we have shifted our perceptions and our minds are powerful in this ability. But what happens when we're triggered? We backslide. We revert back to our homeostasis. Organized religion doesn't have a good answer. Organized religion doesn't have a good answer for that, at least not when I was involved. It's difficult to really learn. It's difficult to really learn to understand oneself when you're always supposed to be focused on Christ. Judge not, lest you be judged is one of the tenets of Christianity. We are all fallen. No one can live up to the ideal. It's pointless to try, and you're not expected to because Jesus has provided the answer, the way out of the legalistic system, and the way through to the Father, the source. God made you, and he does not make mistakes. You are loved unconditionally, are perfect just the way you are, and right here, right now, you are already enough. Your soul has a purpose. We are here to learn and develop ourselves, and the Christian ideal is that the fruits of our labor should glorify God. But knowing where our soul's purpose ends and our shadow material begins demands that you set aside the ego for a thorough understanding of who we truly are and the forces that have shaped us. But what if you grew up in a toxic family environment with a narcissistic parent? What if you internalized their voices of negativity and shame and their crazy-making, unrealistic expectations? In my opinion, it's necessary to be able to lean on others who have been there and truly understand what you've been through. This is a conversation requiring raw, brutal honesty. Giving it all to Jesus and puppies and bunnies isn't going to cut it. Growing up in the 1970s, there were a lot of things no one ever talked about. No one ever talked about child abuse, incest, molestation, drug abuse, or alcoholism. I'm not saying these issues weren't common. They were rampant. But families then, more so than today, kept those secrets to themselves and swept everything under the rug to maintain the veneer of wholesomeness. So let's imagine that you grew up in a theocratic community. You were raised in the church. Your social life revolved around the church. Your attendance and adherence are a given. It's what's expected of you. Conform. It's tradition. It's who you are. It's all you know. There are no avenues other than the accepted, rubber-stamped and orthodox ways. After all, when your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. That is, unless you choose to be a rebel, to emancipate oneself. After all, we all possess the free will to either rebel against the program or go along with it. Life is a never-ending continuum of free will choices. The question is whether these choices are made consciously or unconsciously. Is this choice serving the soul or the shadow? I can only speak for myself, but I think it would be very difficult, if even possible, to grow up to be an authentic human being raised in these circumstances. Perhaps under ideal conditions with a genuine and caring family, the kind that pulls together with honest and open communication, then yes, an enthusiastic yes. However, with a toxic family, keepers of secrets, one might grow up with an assortment of complexes, routinely going through the motions as one has been programmed to, an empty shell with a persona carefully crafted to meet, or better yet, exceed expectations. An unconscious and unfulfilled person who is trying to be something they are not because they don't know who they really are is not equipped to make good or rational choices. The more bad choices you make and the older you get, the harder it is to set things right. And when you are not content or fulfilled, and when you are not content nor fulfilled, and when you are not content nor fulfilled with your reality, then you cease living in the present. You turn your attention elsewhere. Yes, you are here and going through the motions like a good little automaton, but your energies are focused elsewhere. This imbalance in your life is a crisis point. When I joined the OTO, I wanted power and control. Yes, I was just as interested in enlightenment, but I wanted power and control. The whole lodge was full of misfits wanting power and control. The internet is full of disinformation about Ordo Templi Orientis. It wasn't openly, overtly evil. They really didn't teach you very much. There were members who yearned for something more satanic, and those people left to join the Temple of Set. I ended up learning what I wanted to learn, but not at all in a way I expected. If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't. Such is the nature of Luciferian things. But some people have to learn the hard way. But the point is, the object is that you learn. This concludes part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 when I wrap up the whole theory. Thank you. After Arts out.